Now, the U.S. trade deficit increasing in August to $53.2 billion after U.S. soybean exports fell by $1 billion amid ongoing trade tensions with China. Joining us to discuss if the U.S. and China can reach a trade deal is Kevin Rudd, president of the Asia Society Policy Institute and the former Prime Minister of Australia. A very good afternoon to you, Kevin. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Let's talk about the battle with China at the moment. I mean, on the one hand, the U.S. is making deals with Mexico, Canada, and South Korea, which is encouraging to see. On the other hand, the Vice President really upping the anti-China rhetoric this week. Is China in a different situation to those other countries, and is there any prospect of those tensions easing in the short term?
Certainly the administration's strategy, as I see it, is to say to Beijing, by the way, all these other guys that you thought you had a common alliance with on trade against the United States, well, we've just dealt with each of them, and you, China, are now alone. That's part of the administration's effort, I think, to bring maximum diplomatic pressure to bear on Beijing. But on the reality of the actual trade negotiations, the view from Beijing is, number one, we can't actually begin to cut a deal this side of the midterms, because who knows what will emerge in the politics of the United States after the midterms. What will be the Congress, what will be the administration, will there be changes, etc. And secondly, the Vice President's speech yesterday at the Hudson Institute is a massive, not shot across the bows, it's a broadside. And therefore, the Chinese political establishment is, in the moment, fundamentally re-evaluating as to whether the United States, in its judgment, wants a deal at all.
Do you view that China is, in fact, losing the trade war?
I spent 2 or 3 visits in China during the summer. Didn't go to Beijing, went to provincial cities where a whole bunch of mid-cap firms are. China's growth is slowing, but the trade war is one element of many at work at present, including a slower pace of economic reform and a crowding out of some of the market space by Chinese state-owned enterprises against private firms. But in the aggregate numbers, China's economy is slowing. But the question really is, what will China's actions now be, not just against the measures now threatened further by the United States on trade, but in response to the statement by Vice President Trump yesterday. And I begin to see for the first time saber-rattling in Chinese political circles about the imposition of tariff or tax measures against American components in global supply chains.
Is President Xi Jinping getting hit by this domestically at all? I mean, we all refer to him as all-powerful, the recent change in the constitution, but is this hurting him? Is there the possibility he could get toppled internally?
The polling data is not complete in China. 0. And so we're left in this whole realm of making qualitative judgments. I think it's fair to say he's copped some flack over the relationship with the United States. I think the Chinese government in the first quarter underestimated the resolve of the Trump administration to act in the way in which it's done. But my bottom line guess is, particularly after the statement by Vice President Trump yesterday, which is an attack, Vice President Pence yesterday, which is an attack on China on multiple levels, is that there are 2 strategies for China: begin to negotiate and find a way out, or double down in a nationalist response. I'm beginning to see much more evidence on the latter rather than the former. So there may be a domestic critique over not handling the American relationship well, but it's not difficult in any country to begin to wave the nationalist flag when you sense that you're under external attack.
For so long, it was all about globalization, and now we're starting to see these, of course, isolationist and protectionist policies. If you're other countries that have trading relationships with the United States and China, are you going to be forced to pick a side?
Well, the resolve of Australian foreign policy for 25 years is never will we pick sides. Our security partner is the United States, has been that way for 100 years. Our economic partner, the principal one these days, is China. But I think a number of countries in our region are starting to feel the pinch. I mean, countries like Australia, we're old enough and ugly enough to make pretty hard-nosed decisions that we can reconcile these 2 worlds. But the pressure is starting to come on some, and the soft underbelly, where this is being felt most acutely, is Southeast Asia.
I want to switch focus, if I may, Mr. Rudd, to the topic of Brexit. How is Brexit viewed and framed in Australia? And I ask it from the perspective of a country that's in the Commonwealth, whose head of state is Her Majesty the Queen. Do Australians welcome Britain pulling out of the EU, or do they look at it and think, gosh, that's a crazy thing to be doing?
Look, we have our own Land of Hope and Glory set in Australia, who quietly hum God Save the Queen before they go to bed of an evening with a warm cup of cocoa. And I'm sure they love the idea that, you know, Britain will return to the empire and we can basically reconstitute a black and white movie about the way things used to be. I think most of modern Australia scratches their head and says, what the hell are you folks doing? And there's kind of a reason for it as well. I mean, Australians actually like Britain and they want Britain to succeed. And we do not see your exit from Europe as an ingredient in your long-term success, or even, frankly, the survival of institutions like the city. And the second reason, too, a whole bunch of Australians, like there's 250,000 Australians living in London at any given day, stacks of them all over the place. One of the reasons they go there is because they like it, but it's also their springboard into Europe. So you unplug that, then what do? So this view that I hear from high Tories in the UK that the old empire is out there just waiting for Mother England to return to our collective embrace, I think is fanciful.